So, in a 5-4 decision, the court has eliminated the public sector's union's ability to collect fair share or agency fees from workers who choose not to join as union members, but are still protected under union agreements. So, right now on Twitter, they're acting like this is a massive travesty and unions are under attack. And, Trump and the Supreme Court, it's another horrible decision by them, and it's the end of the world, and workers are now weaker because of this. But this just has to do, first of all, with public sector workers. So these are government employees who often get paid a lot more than private sector people, or they get paid like not a lot more, but they get better benefits, and they are pretty secure. These are pretty cushy jobs for the amount of work or what they are required to do. Because when you work for the government, oftentimes you're not as competitive. You don't have to work as hard as you do within the private sector. Like, I've known tons of people who have worked for the government building roads, and one guy, he was building roads too fast. His bosses came to him and said, hey, slow down. You are building this shit too fast. We're not going to have any work. And, this will actually lower their budget for next year, because they'll be like, wow, you did it under budget. So, you only need 100,000 this year as opposed to 200,000. And we all know that is not how people work. They're like, oh, we want more money. So then they can, do the work on 100,000, then they can just splurge the rest on whatever the fuck they want. And this happens all the time within the government. But what happened right now is just, now unions cannot force you to pay into something that you do not want to pay into. Like, how is that a bad thing? Like, they're acting like it's the end of the world. But this is how unions, they come in and, they steal money from people who don't even want to be a part of it. Like, they go to the government, they create this fair share or agency fees. We have the same type of thing in Canada, where even if you don't want to be a part of the union, they're like, well, you still got to pay us money because you are getting protected either way by the things that we are doing. And that's a load of shit too. Like, a lot of the things that they say that they are doing for you, that they have gotten for you, is just things that the private sector is already giving to you because of competition. Because, you need to pay people accordingly, otherwise they're going to leave. Like, if people just assume, like, okay, employers, yeah, they're going to pay everything, they're going to try to get the best bargain they possibly can, but they also want to keep good workers. They want to keep people working in their industry. So if you pay like a roofer or somebody guy like $20 an hour, and somebody else is paying 25 and they're still making a good profit, like, everybody is going to leave your company and go to them. So it's going to force you to raise your wages to pay these people more money so you can stay in competition with these other people. And it has very little to do with unions. Like, for me, personally, for me, an example, like, I had a company. I'm in a company right now that had a union. We just got out of it. It was a huge battle. We had to like pay a lawyer a bunch of money. They were kicking their feet and shit. But I had come from a company that didn't have a union, and we were still getting raises. We were still getting paid every year to like the same wages as everybody else. So it had little to do with the union, and more to do with just the fact that you're competing with other companies. So this is how people get paid more money, right? It has, you don't need unions, and unions aren't necessarily a bad thing in general, right? Like, it's okay if people come together voluntarily, but what the Supreme Court overruled here was unions going in and forcing people to pay them money. So You know, if it, you shouldn't need to force people to pay you money. If it's really good, if they really want to be in it, they will join it. And if they are getting uh, benefits on behalf of the work that you're apparently doing, then so be it, right? Are you really that greedy that you gotta steal from these people in order to be like, well, you're benefiting from what I'm doing, but that is a crock of shit as well. Like you are not benefiting. Like I said before, it has more to do with competition. Like they did the same thing in my company when we were trying to leave. They showed up. They're like, well, look at all the things we're doing for you. Look at this. Look at this. And without us, all this is going to go away. So are you really sure you guys want to leave us? And like unions, especially like, they'll always go to the government. They try to get these laws passed like this. And like they use these fear-mongering tactics. Like what they were doing for us is after we got out of the union, they started sending some guys letters saying that because you left, you were going to be charged and like $30,000. Like it was all bullshit. Like our lawyers looked at this and they're like, okay, this is nonsense, right? But they're doing anything they possibly can because we were like 20% of their income. And like for example, training fees, we would give them, I don't know, like $50,000 a year. Like our boss would cover half of it, we would give the other half. And then out of the year, we were only able to take out like 25% of that amount to use for training, and the rest went to them. So they were getting a really good deal for pretty much just doing nothing, kicking their feet, saying that we're collectively bargaining for you and we're doing this for you and we're doing that for you. When in reality, they're not. They're just sitting around. Wages are just going up based on competition, based on supply, based on demand, based on the free market a lot of the times. And they're just sitting back and reaping the rewards, reaping the benefits of the actual hard workers that are going in there and doing work and stuff. But like I said before, it's not necessarily all unions are bad. You can still come together as a company, like as a bunch of workers, and be like, okay guys, let's put some pressure on our boss to increase our wages, right? And the only way that you can really do this is if you bring value to the job, though, right? Like if your boss can just easily replace you like that, then it's a lot harder to do that. And the fact with these government employees and these public sectors is like they are just way more protected than the average person. Like they are way more protected than the private sector, and because they have a monopoly on a lot of the industries that they are working in, like you see what they're talking about today. They're like nurses, teachers, policemen, firemen. So these are all people that have a monopoly on these industries. And this is why you always see strikes when it comes to the public sector, because they have a monopoly. Because when it comes to the private sector, they don't have a monopoly on shit. Like the roofing industry, they don't have a monopoly on the roofing industry because there's 10, 15 other companies in the city that people will go to, right? If your company fails or if you're not paying them enough. But when it's the government, it's like they don't know. They're either going to pay the government workers too little for what they're doing or too much for what they're doing. And the government workers know that because they have a monopoly, because they're like, hey, if we're the only ones building roads we're the only ones policing people and we all strike, then they're going to be kind of fucked. If we're the only people that are nurses and are helping people and we strike, this is going to cost them a lot of money. They're going to be fucked, so they're going to do something about it. And they're abusing their power, which is bullshit. I hate government workers for doing that because, people in the private sector can't do this, and they're holding up taxpayers hostage. They're holding up innocent people hostage based on government practices or based on the fact that they want more money or they think they deserve more money. They think they deserve 3-week fucking holidays and all this shit, right? Like unions, yeah, they work really hard for government workers and stuff. Not so hard for private sector workers because they're often protected by the government through these regulations that allow them to stay in power, like the fair share thing that the government rule against today. Like, people are, like I said, they're acting like it's the end of the world. It's crazy. Tack on unions, and unions always do this fear-mongering propaganda. They do this in Canada on the radio whenever their funding is threatened. They're like, do you like parks? Do you want our parks to stay in Canadian and stay in the public service? You need to fund us and give us more money. It's never anything about, they never want to make things more efficient or anything. We just need to give more money to these people. We need to keep it under government control, and we need to make sure we have a monopoly on this, so whenever we feel like we're not getting paid enough or this shit, we can just strike, and you'll be forced to, like, I don't know, homeschool your kids, because all the fucking teachers in your area will be like, well, hey, they have no other option but government schools at this time, right? Whereas if it was more of a free market system, a lot of schools, people assume like, well, all the poor kids, they'll have nowhere to go to school, and it'll be too expensive because of all these private educations. But what happens with supply and demand, right? Things get cheaper. Right now, there is a lack of private schools because there is an abundance of public schools of this. So this is keeping the prices high for private education. So if you were to remove the monopoly that the government pretty much has on a lot of schools and the massive influence, this would decrease the prices for private schools. It would make these private schools more accessible to everybody. And the things that these unions are bitching about right now, how they're like, well, we need to force these people to pay us because they are benefiting from the overflow of what we're doing for this sum of people, right? They're like, this is the argument. Like, well, they're benefiting from what we're doing, so they need to pay us. Where it would be similar in this system, whereas a lot of people, like school, would invest in schools, and you would have a lot of excess money, resources that you could help kids go to these schools for free. You could cover their cost because there is an abundance, there is an excess of money. There is an overlap, and we could help cover these people's costs. It's like the same thing with policing, right? They're like, well, if it's private, then what, poor people won't be policed? It's like, no, the people in the community that want to be policed will pay police, and then they will police everything, and the poor people who cannot afford to hire police will also be protected by proxy by living in the area that other people are willing to pay police to protect. So, if it's up to the unions, like, no, okay, we need to force them to do this through law, through this. So it's like, this is a great decision. This is just, they're just mad because they're greedy. This is probably hundreds of millions and millions of dollars for them down the drain that they're no longer going to get. So this is why they're acting like it's the end of the world. And there's a bunch of gullible idiots who think that unions are the saving grace of humanity, and without them we'd all be fucked. Where it's like, it's the Industrial Revolution, it's capitalism that has raised the wages for people, that has raised the standard of living. It's not because of fucking unions and shit. They've had some impact maybe early on and stuff, but like I said before, unions kind of lose a lot of their what they're good for when they become non-voluntary, when you have them lobbying for the government to come in there and force you to be a part of it, right? And make it extremely hard for you to leave it. It's got to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And thank God Trump was able to pick, somebody who's more right-wing, right? Thank fucking God, because if not, the country would be going in a much different direction. And, maybe it's just going to slow things down for an eventual change anyways, but at least it's slowing things down. And it's really pissing off fucking liberals, and they're acting like this is just the worst thing ever. I love all of these latest decisions by the Supreme Court, right? It just shows you that Trump made a good pick, and that it was a very important decision that people are underscoring. Like, oh, what has Trump done? What has he done at all? He's done absolutely nothing. And it's like, hey, this right there, him making this pick is a very big thing in of itself. But that's all I pretty much had to say. If you like my content, subscribe and have a good day. See ya.